All right. So we're live again. We're just ripping through these things. Yeah. So I don't know where I got this book, but I used to so a lot of these books we're talking about today, Kafka, Burroughs, and others, and Anthony Burgess. I read, when I was a teenager, and me and my buddies here in the '80s, Burgess was still alive. We've This was kind of considered like, oh, this is like almost like reading like Finnegan's Wake or something, but I just read it like this past year. Like in the past. I don't know if it this year. I read a lot of books that I read when I was younger, like Our Lady of the Flowers and Clockwork Orange and Lord of the Flies. Some of these books, and these books which were so difficult back when I was 15 or 16. Now it's like I just read this in like 4 hours, and it's like, oh man, we're this is so it's so transparent because, well, of course I've become used to this book and seen the movie like 100 times and stuff. So, and the movie's like is not like the book. And in fact, the book has like another chapter where Alex kind of hangs out, that they took out of the movie, like because the movie's a little bit different, but they talk about that. But I think they had it in the British version, but not in the American version. The American version ends like in the same. I don't know. Maybe we'll talk about that, but let's see. So let's just read a little bit of like how what it sounds like, and then I'll talk about the what happens in the novel, which you probably know. So chapter one. What's it like? This is like it's like these really short chapters, and it's like and then after prison, and then yeah, and and this is like came out in '86. It's yeah, it talks about like how the last part was like dropped by the British, by the American. No, it dropped from the American edition. They dropped out the last part, publisher's choice. But I mean, it seemed like Burgess wrote this in a really quickly. It seems like he just kind of, it's probably like his least. I mean, that's why I remember. I think we to talk about an interview. Okay, so but oh yeah, and I just mentioned like Burgess also is almost like the same age as William S. Burroughs, and they both lived in Tangiers in London. So they used to hang out and drink. They were like drinking buddies. So it's kind of funny that I'm reading all these guys. Kafka, if he would have lived, maybe he would have like hung out with these guys. Okay, so chapter one. What's it gonna be then? There was me, that is Alex, and my three droogs, that is Pete, Georgie, and Dim. Dim being really dim, and we sat in the Korova Milk Bar making up our razzle docs what to do with an evening. A flip, dark, chill winter, bastard though dry. The Korova Milk Bar was a milk plus mezzo, and you may, oh my brothers, have forgotten what these mezzos were like. Things changing so scory these days. Everybody's very quick to forget newspapers not being read much either. Well, what they sold there was milk plus something else. They had no license for selling liquor, but there was no law against prodding some of the new vetches, which they used to put in the old Moloko, so you can peat it with Velocet or Synthemec or Drencom or one or two other veshes, which would give you a nice, quite hard show, 15 minutes admiring bog and all, his holy angels and saints in your left shoe with the lights bursting all over your mazaga. Or could peat milk with knives in it, as we used to say, and this would sharpen you up and make you ready for a bit of dirty 20 to 1. And that was what we were Peyton this evening, and I'm starting off the story with. So yeah, there's a lot of self. Uh, I guess it's supposed to be like his journal or something. So, but like I used to ask people, I go, hey, what, like, I mean, but it's pretty straightforward. But there's occasional like Russian word, but I think the reason for that was because like it was Clockwork Orange was why there's so many Russian words in the language is as if just like there's a lot of French words in English. There's like it's written in like this socialistic future where Russia had taken over parts of Europe and England and stuff and kind of influenced it with this, and Russian words kind of entered the language and stuff, and I mean that's at least my take from it is like why they have all the Russians and stuff. But let's see. Let me look at the book. Okay, so the book. Okay, so let's talk about the plot. Okay, so Alex is 15 years old. Malcolm McLaren in the movie is quite a bit older. Maybe 25, and his friends, Drew's, and the language is called Natsat, and fellow gang members are Dim, he was the gang's muscle, Georgie, second in command, and Pete, who basically he's like the sidekick, for their taste for ultra violence. Alex is characterized as a sociopath and hardened juvenile delinquent. He's also intelligent, quick-witted, and enjoys classical music. He is particularly fond of Beethoven, who he calls lovely Ludwig van. The Droogs sit in their favorite hangout, the Korova Milk Bar, drinking Milk Plus, milk laced with the drug of choice, to prepare for the night of ultraviolence. They assault a scholar walking home from a public library, rob a shop, leaving the owner and his wife bloodied and unconscious, beat up a beggar, then scuffle with a rival gang. So like only part of that happened in the movie. Like they do a couple of those things. Joyriding through the countryside in a stolen car, they break through into an isolated college and terrorize a young couple. They're beating the husband and gang raping his wife. The husband is a writer working on a manuscript entitled The Clockwork Orange. So that's like another device that Burgess uses to, make, like mise en scene or whatever we talk about. It's like so. I guess this is also he's kind of like writing a book because this comes out in '62, so he's kind of writing a nouveau roman or something. Because I mean, I was kind of interested in Burgess, a little bit in the '60s and '70s, but I just never really continued to read them or really be that concerned. Other English writers kind of came along, some, and I don't know, but let's see what. Okay, so let's see. Okay, so they go back to the milk bar for a second, like they do in the movie, and Alex hits Dim because when the woman starts singing at his home, Alex plays classical music at top volume, which he describes as giving him orgasmic bliss. And then Alex feigns illness to stay out of school the next day, following an unexpected from P.R. Deltoid, his post-corrective advisor. Alex visits a record store where he meets two preteen girls, invites them back to his flat where he drugs and rapes them. It just seems that in the movie they sort of have a threesome. It doesn't seem like much of a rape. That night, after a nap, he finds his droogs waiting downstairs in the lobby. George challenges Alex for his leadership of the gang, demanding they focus on higher value targets in the robberies. Alex quells his rebellion by slashing Dim's hand and fighting with Georgie, then sues the gang by agreeing to Georgie's plan to rob the home of a wealthy elderly woman. Alex breaks in and knocks the woman unconscious, but when he hears sirens and opens the door to flee, Dim strikes him as a revenge for the earlier fight. The gang abandons Alex on the front steps and he's arrested. So, and then part two, is it? Yeah. Okay. That goes up to page. That's about 80 pages. So that's almost half of the novel up until then. Then we get to part two, which is the Ludovico technique, and he's convicted of murder, sentenced to 14 years in prison. His parents visit one day to inform him that Georgie has been killed in a botched robbery. 2 years into his term, he has attained a job in one of the prison chapels playing music on a stereo. The chaplain mistakes Alex's Bible studies for stirring of faith. In reality, he only reads the scriptures for violent or sexual passages. After his fellow cellmates blame him for a beating of a troublesome cellmate to death. He is chosen to undergo experimental behavior modification treatment called the Ludovico technique in exchange for having the remainder of his sentence commuted. So it's a little bit different than the movie, where they kind of have a scene in the courtyard where the government picks him out because he's kind of bold and brash. The technique is a form of aversion therapy. He's injected with nausea-inducing drugs while watching violent films, eventually conditioning him to be severely ill at the mere thought of violence. As an unintended consequence, the soundtrack of the film, Beethoven's Ninth Symphony, renders Alex unable to enjoy his classical music as he did before. The technique's effectiveness is demonstrated to a group of VIPs who watch Alex collapse before a man who slaps him and before a scantily clad young woman. Although the prison chaplain accuses the state of stripping Alex of free will, the government officials on the scene are pleased with the results, and Alex is released from prison. So after prison, he goes to his parents' flat. He's home, and they have a lodger. He's now homeless. He's wandering the streets. He gets rejected by his parents, his friends. The homeless people start beating him up. Two policemen come to his rescue. They turned out to be Dim and Billy Boy, the former gang rival leader, not Georgie. Georgie's has died, years ago or 2 years ago. Okay, so they take him outside and beat him up. So somehow they just kind of leave him out in the countryside. Just happens that he goes to the same house, and the writer F. Alexander, the guy that's writing a book called Clockwork Orange, his name happens to be F. Alexander. Still lives there, but his wife has died, which he believes to be injuries she sustained in the rape. He does not recognize Alex, but gives him shelter. Alexander and his colleagues, all highly critical of the government, plan to use Alex as a symbol of the state brutality and thus prevent the incoming government from being reelected. Alex inadvertently reveals that he was the ringleader of the home invasion. He is removed from the cottage and locked in a upper story bedroom as a relentless barrage of classical music plays over speakers. He attempts suicide by leaping from a window. He wakes up in a hospital where he's courted by the government officials, anxious to counter the bad publicity created by the suicide attempt. He is informed that F. Alexander has been put away. Alex is offered a well-paying job if he agrees to side with the government. Once discharged, a round of tests revealed that his old violent impulses have returned, indicating that the hospital doctors have undergone the effects of his condition. As photographers snap pictures, Alex daydreams of orgiastic violence and reflects, "I was cured all right." In the final chapter, which was deleted in the the American. He's now 18. It's a couple years later. He's 18-year-old and he's working for the nation's musical recording archives. Finds himself half-heartedly prepared for another night of crime with his new gang, Len, Rick, and Bully. After a chance encounter with Pete, who has reformed, and Mary Alex finds herself taking less and less pleasure in acts of senseless violence. He begins contemplating giving up crime himself and become a productive member of society and start his own family while reflecting on the notion that his children could end up being just as destructive as he. So, yeah, the book has 3 parts, each with 7 chapters. Burgess has stated that the total of 21 chapters was an intentional nod of the age of 21 being recognized as a milestone in human maturation. The 21st chapter was omitted from editions published in the United States prior to 86. In the introduction to the updated American text, Burgess explains that when he first brought the book to American publisher, he was told that the U.S. audience would never go for the final chapter, in which Alex sees the errors of his way, decides he has lost his taste for violence, and resolves to turn his life around. At the American publishing assistance, Burgess allows his editors to cut the redeeming final chapter so that the tale of the darker would end on a darker note, with Alex becoming his old ultra-violent self again, and ending which the publisher's assistant would be more realistic and appealing to a U.S. audience. The film adaptation, directed by Kubrick, is based on the American edition of the book and considered to be badly flawed by Burgess. Kubrick is called 21 an extra chapter and claimed that he had not read the original version until he had virtually finished the screenplay, and that he had never given serious consideration to using it. In Kubrick's opinion, as the opinion of other readers, including the American editor, the final chapter was unconvincing and inconsistent with the book. Kubrick's stance was, when compared to the standard Hollywood practice of producing films with familiar tropes of resolving moral messages and good triumphing over evil before the film's end. So that was kind of tacked on. So Clockwork Orange was written in Hove, a seaside town. Burgess had arrived back in Britain after his stint abroad to see as much as changed. A youth culture had developed, like, and Burgess, like this hip, the, whatever it was, Beatlemania and the mods and stuff had been going on. And, Burgess being, 50, almost 50 years old by this time, I guess, yeah. He probably thought, like, I gotta write something about this. Oh yeah, and then the other thing was, like, Burgess, his wife claimed to be. Not only did he hang around Burroughs, his wife also claimed to be related to Christopher Isherwood and stuff. So yeah, behaviorism was like another big thing, like, around this time. And he said he wrote this book in 3 weeks, which I can believe, but inspired 3 weeks, I'll say, And he said he had heard the phrase "as queer as a Clockwork Orange" in a London pub in 1945, and assumed it was a Cockney expression. So, let's see what else. His second expression there was a pun on the Malay word orang, meaning man. The novella contains no other Malay words or links. In a prefatory note to Clockwork Orange, A Play with Music, he wrote that the title was a metaphor for organic entity full of juice and sweetness and agreeable odor being turned into a mechanism. In his essay on Clockwork Oranges, Burgess asserts the title would be appropriate for a story about the application of Pavlovian or mechanical laws to an organism which, like a fruit, was capable of color and sweetness. While addressing the reader in a letter before some editions of the book, the author says that the man ceases to have free will, that they are no longer a man, just like a Clockwork Orange, a shiny, appealing object, but just a toy to be wound up by either God or the devil or by the state. So, yeah, the slang. Let's see. So, yeah, yeah, but booksellers were arrested for selling this novel. But I mean, like Burgess was. I mean, wasn't really like that out there. As a writer, he wasn't really. You know, I, some of the books that were banned and stuff like just seems a little strange. But it's kind of like it's been referred to. I mean, they've done plays based on Clockwork Orange and films and stuff. Like Andy Warhol did his movie Vinyl, um, which I mean, let's see, yeah, I guess the Vinyl was done in '65. Yeah, so I mean, it's definitely an important book, and maybe it's like kind of lost some of its um, shock value, but and I just when I read it like this past year, it just seemed like kind of like easy reading for me. Okay, so that's enough for Anthony Burgess. I love the movie. The book's good. Burgess, maybe I'll go back and check out some of the other Burgess stuff, but of course, he's a critic of James Joyce, and that was kind of, I guess, that was my interest in him originally because he was into music and James Joyce. Okay, so let's end it now, and we'll do one more.